Egypt currently receives 8 million tourists a year, most of them attracted to the ancient sites of the pyramids, the Valley of the Kings and Luxor. The Egyptian government recently announced plans to double the number of visitors to the country within the next decade to 16 million by the year 2016.
Tourism has changed a lot here. It used to be that it would be the more moneyed tourist that was coming to Egypt, but Egypt has now got to be a popular sun destination. So a lot of people are coming here, maybe they only booked on Friday, and they know very, very little about the history or anything.
And there is a real concern that the ancient sites simply cannot cope with this volume of traffic.
Tourists are the enemy of archaeology. If you will let tourism to be mass tourism like this, these monuments would be deteriorated completely.
Tourism in Egypt has been growing exponentially for the last several decades, and these tourists are putting, obviously, an increasing pressure on each one of these monuments. We can get 7,000 or 8,000 tourists a day in the Valley of the Kings, although any number more than about, say, 1,500 is a dangerous number. If tourist numbers go up, as the Ministry of Tourism has expressly said they want to have happen, and there are no additional controls on how these tourists visit sites, I don't think the monuments can survive. I think that in a decade or decade and a half, they would simply be gone.
Tourists have been visiting Egypt's ancient wonders in growing numbers since travel agent Thomas Cook organised the first package tour to the country for wealthy Europeans in 1869. In those days, there was little concern for conservation.
The early travelers would often leave their names. Now, you'll see there are a number of 19th century names and graffiti in the upper parts of the walls. Unfortunately, there were no laws protecting the temples then, and often tourists would chisel out little pieces of relief to take back as souvenirs. Some of the holes up in the upper parts of the walls are from these little souvenir gathering junkets. The Egyptians believed that when you carved something in stone, you made it eternal. And if you carved your name in stone, you ergo became eternal. You shared in that immortality. You have tourists even today carving their names on the walls.
But it's not just the occasional act of wanton vandalism that's damaging the ancient sites. The very presence of such huge numbers of people in the tombs and temples is also accelerating their decay.
Going into the tombs nowadays, you walk in and you're sweating because of the level of humidity in there. And they reckon that the average tourist is putting out about half a pint of water. So that water has to go somewhere. The humidity levels tend to have an effect on the plastering and the paint inside the tombs. And very often you can see plaster flaking off, and this is being caused by that. Sadly, also people touching as well. I have seen someone in the tomb last week going flick, flick, oh, it just comes off.
I can remember going into some of the tombs in the Valley of the Kings 43 years ago, and I remember very well because it was such a moving and impressive experience, looking at walls and seeing beautiful paintings and carvings. And it's heartbreaking to go back into some of those tombs today and see what were beautifully painted scenes now flaking off, traces of paint lying on the floor, the plaster cracked and split, structural damage, in part because there have been no attempts yet made to systematically protect these tombs from temperature changes, humidity, from vandalism, from thoughtless tourists who bang their camera bags against the wall. These are the kinds of things that are going to have to be done, and they're going to have to be done soon.
1 in 10 Egyptians are employed in the tourism industry. With the country so heavily reliant on visitors as a vital source of foreign currency, it's little wonder that the government is keen to increase tourist numbers. So the authorities are pressing ahead with some ambitious plans to develop tourism.
We have two major projects here: to preserve antiquity and to increase tourism, because Luxor lives on tourism. We call it, Luxor, the chicken which gives us a golden egg every day. So we have to preserve this area.
But it is the Egyptian people who may lose out. The village of Khana lies just yards from the Ramesseum Memorial Temple on the west bank of the Nile. The houses are nestled amongst the ancient tombs of the nobles. But now the governor of Luxor says the villagers must move on, their houses bulldozed, to provide tourists with a more perfect, sanitized experience.
150 years ago, the people start to build their houses on the tombs, and really it is a disaster. Of course, at the beginning they refused to move because everybody said this is where I have been born and my grandfather and so on. And of course they were happy because all the time the tourists between them, they can get some money, they can sell something, again do something. But finally, they were obliged, even by law, and we stopped providing water and sewage and electricity. So we started to convince them and to persuade them to move to this new village by giving a better life for them.
But many locals are afraid for their livelihoods, dependent as they are on the passing trade from tourists visiting the tombs. Mohammed Ahmed Ismail has lived in Khana all his life. He's worried about the effect the governor's so-called master plan will have on his family.
My family here for a long time, and then I have 6 children, and my brother also with me, and my mother. This is more than 21 person in the house. And then now with the government we need to move the whole village. Yes, move, but I need some place, good place for us. Yeah, if a good place, okay, I move now. But you need a place, a good place for all that. One flat, not enough for all.
And the governor's master plan will also impact on residents on the east bank of the River Nile. The temples of Luxor and Karnak were once linked by the 3-kilometre avenue of the Sphinxes. The road disappeared centuries ago, with Luxor town built on top of it. But now the authorities want to rebuild that avenue.
This is the major event or project now in Luxor, to change Luxor to an open museum.
However, the project will mean that hundreds of homes, a school and even a mosque will have to make way for the avenue, and over 300 families will be evicted.
To convince them that they should move, you have to give them modern and better home, more than they did. Money talks, And the people, they started to be convinced that we will do that. We will move them. But it is not of course, it was by force, but we are to try to convince them and also to compensate them in a very correct way.
And the authorities also believe that the ancient temples can only be saved from saltwater damage by taking back the agricultural land that borders the sites, in the process displacing hundreds of residents.
And we decided that we are going to take the land from the people. So no agriculture areas around this antiquity, because otherwise we were going to lose it.
If the plan goes ahead, the farmers will be forced to leave the fertile lands of the Nile Valley and given compensation to move to the desert and start all over again. According to the head of Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities, it's a price worth paying.
We, as human beings, God can create from us millions. But you cannot repeat the pyramid. You cannot make the Sphinx again. And this is why the people has to stop complaining, and they have to know that they have a heritage that no one have. A heritage that taught the world thousands of years, science and technology. We have to save it, and we cannot listen to the cry of the people.
The antiquities of ancient Egypt have survived for more than 4 millennia. But if they're to be preserved for future generations, drastic action is required across the region, and time is running out.
What we have preserved to us is an intact imperial religious cult center from Egypt's greatest empire period. It's an extraordinary gift from the past. And so to see these monuments start to age so quickly now is absolutely heartbreaking.
You can see all these great temples, all these great mosques of the heritage of Egypt, the Sphinx and the pyramids can be finished. Means we lost our past. If you lose your past, you will lose your future.